So now we come to an interesting point in the show here on Boles.tv. Hey, it's David Boles here with you live, high noon Eastern. Over the weekend, Jana Marie and I watched a movie that we had originally watched in 1993. And it's a movie called Falling Down by Michael Douglas is the star. And I'll show you the page. And it's very interesting because I remember this movie quite fondly, in fondly meaning in an affectionate way of memory and not in a fond way of, oh my goodness, wasn't this a great movie about a guy who goes out and kills a lot of people. And I'm going to be talking about the plot, so if you haven't seen it or you want to see it, don't listen, but it's 30 years old, I think last week. It's about a 2-hour movie. And the PR blip is an ordinary man frustrated with the various flaws he sees in society begins to psychotically and violently lash out against them. And this is a Joel Schumacher movie, but the acting was really terrific. And we're going to talk a little bit about what this all means in the larger structure of a movie that is 30 years old and how it is prescient today in what it discovered for us way back when in 1993. Well, the movie is centered really on telephones. And if you're old like me, the telephone was a magical curse. I loathed the telephone. I love my cell phone because I can let my voicemail manage everything that I want to do. I don't have to answer the phone. Hey, it's Artist Dora, just in time. Crazy with all these nonstop shootings. Yes, very interesting. And so this movie is about a ringing phone. All the action in the movie happens over a telephone, which I really hate as a dramatist. And when I teach my students and in my scripts, I say, please, don't ever have a scene with the telephone because it's not dramatic. You have one person on the phone here, one person on the phone here, back and forth, back and forth. It's not interesting. Find a way to put them in the same room together so they can have a conversation. It's a cheat to use a phone. And now today, the last 10 years, everybody has a cell phone. That's how people have conversations. They don't meet face-to-face anymore. They do it over the phone. But if you can have them speaking to each other in real time, as the old classics, where there were no telephones, you'll have a much more effective play. But that's beyond the point of this. So we have a lot of ringing phones. The whole movie begins with Michael Douglas having an S-fit over trying to get change for the payphone so he can call his wife, ex-wife, to say that he's coming over to visit her because it's his child's birthday. That's how the whole drama begins, over a payphone, over change for a phone. And there's ringing phones, and the wife hears the ringing phone from the street. In Venice Beach, California, she runs from the street with a child in her hands, past the gate, inside to answer the phone before the person hangs up. And you're realizing, 30 years later, wow, people were really slaves to their phones. People would run to answer a ringing telephone because they thought it was that important. That the person would hang. And there were no answering machines back then. There was no voicemail. If the phone would ring and ring and ring and ring, usually, it could ring for half an hour. There were no rings and it would stop. And then you'd hang up and call back. And I remember when I was at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, Charles Stubblefield was an English professor, one of my favorite professors, and I had a meeting with him one afternoon. And he was an old school guy, very old, wonderful. He lived many, 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 many years longer than many people thought he would. It was late 90s. Amazing. And he was an amazing guy. Loved Mark Twain. He was sort of the Mark Twain era. And at that time, we had the old-fashioned phones that rang like a bell, and they were rotary. And we're there having a meeting about one of my papers, and I'm asking him for some advice. He would tell stories, and he was just wonderful. He'd put his feet up on his desk and talk to you for an hour. He was that kind of professor. So we're chatting, and his phone starts to ring. And he's old, so he has it set on the loudest volume of the ringer. With those old phones, because it was a bell inside the phone, you could, have it full ring, or you could go a half ring, or you go click, 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 instead of ring, 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 or go click, 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 click. Or on some of the phones, you could just turn it all the way off. So his phone is ringing, and I'm, there, and I stop talking because his phone is ringing, and he's going to answer it. And the phone keeps ringing, and he's not answering it. I said, go ahead, answer your phone. And he said, no, I'm talking to you now. Go ahead. So I'm saying, wow, how can I think to speak with this loud, very loud ringing bell going off, every 5 seconds? Ring, ring, ring. I said, no, go ahead. Yeah, answer the phone, I'll wait. No, this is your time. They can wait. And it wasn't going to go to voicemail. It was just going to ring until they gave up. So I said, well, should we, turn it down, the sound, turn off the bell? And he said, no, because if I do that, I'll forget that I turned it down. And I said, over the ringing bell, are you sure you don't want to turn off the ringing bell? Or just answer the phone? Now, I guess I should have been aggressive and picked up the phone and said, Dr. Stubblefield's office, may I help you? But I didn't, because he was old and I respected him and I liked him. So I can't think of anything to say. So he starts talking and, giving me feedback and criticism. And so I'm listening through the ringing of the phone, trying to hear him. And after about 10 more rings, it stops ringing. And he looks at me and goes like this, well, see? And then the phone started ringing again because they're calling back. Because you really knew the English building at the University of Nebraska was huge. And when you called someone, they could usually recognize the ring of their office phone. And if they were in the hallway or down, they would run to answer the phone. So if they didn't make it back in time to answer the phone, the person calling would hang up and then call back because, they're probably in the middle of running to answer the phone. So it started all over again. Ring, ring. I said, we're going to have another 5 minutes of this ringing phone. So I kind of, stood up, got my bag, said, thank you very much. And I'll see you tomorrow in class. And I left. And I closed the door behind me and I'm walking. And then I hear him pick up and answer the phone. So he could have answered the phone and said, call me back in 5 minutes. But he didn't. I guess he was making a point that we were together and no one will interrupt us. And I said, okay, I love the idea, but next time take the phone off the hook. So they'll get a busy signal. That's what you used to do. You didn't want someone to call, you didn't want to hear it. You either unplugged your phone from the wall so it wouldn't ring, or you took the phone off the hook and it would go, and then it would go, and then you would know. They would get a busy signal when you were calling. If you unplugged your phone, it would just ring, so they wouldn't know you were. But if it was a busy signal, they knew two things. You were either on the phone. This is before call waiting, call interrupting, three-way calling. You were either on the phone or you had the phone off the hook because you were having a meeting with a student. But Charles Stubblefield wouldn't do either one of those, and that is my fondest memory of him because it makes me laugh every time I tell the story. So back to the movie Falling Down. We have this story of Michael Douglas trying to get in touch with his wife who will not answer the phone. And when she does answer the phone, she's so ridiculously stupid that she talks to him on the phone. And when he says, I'm coming over with a gun to see you, she doesn't leave. She just stays there waiting for him to show up. I guess maybe she doesn't believe that he's going to show up. And then we have the Robert Duvall character, who is a retiring detective, speaking to his wife on the phone. I mean, what, 5, 10 times about coming home and about what we're going to do. It's just so terrible that all of these conversations happen over the phone. But what I loved at the time about Falling Down in 1993 is that it was very realistic about the hatred and vileness going on in America. And you could also really get a good look at what I call regular life in downtown Los Angeles, because Michael Douglas abandons his car and walks home, I guess, to Venice Beach. So you see the graffiti, you see, the bodegas, the payphones on the corner, and it's very rich and feels very real. It's not a set, it's filmed on location. And it's really very, very lovely. I like the atmosphere. Because usually you see palm trees, expensive houses, the Hollywood sign. You don't see any of that in Falling Down. So in the end, when Michael Douglas goes through this series of killing all these people because he doesn't like them, and he kills them with malice and with a reason, and people are terrified of him, and he's terrifying Los Angeles for an afternoon, you begin to appreciate what he does and how he behaves. In that, he knows he explains this to us very clearly. He knows he's gone too far, that he can't go back. So the only way forward is to continue into the end of what you know it's going to be. And he knows he's giving up his life to have one more visit with his daughter. And he doesn't like certain people, and he shoots them, and he's happy about it. And at the end of the movie, where he, says, oh, you have my gun, Robert Duvall. Robert Duvall is getting ready to shoot him on the Venice Pier. And he says, it doesn't have to be this way, Michael Douglas. You can just give yourself up and, live your life for your child. And Michael Douglas says, no. He says, I have another gun in my pocket. And he pulls it out, shoots Robert Duvall, hits him in the face, and then Robert Duvall fires back and kills Michael Douglas. Now, the beautiful part of it is that Michael Douglas, when he went home to visit his daughter, and his wife finally left with the daughter, that he took his daughter's blue water pistol that we saw throughout the movie, which is beautifully done, and it is that gun that he uses from his pocket to outdraw Robert Duvall and shoot Robert Duvall in the face with water. Robert Duvall is wiping the water off his face as he's shooting Michael Douglas. And then Michael Douglas, in the tableau of the end of the movie, falls over the pier and dies in the water. And before he does all that, he says, oh, so I'm the bad guy. Now that's very interesting. Because he is the bad guy. He killed a lot of people that day. Now, other people started it, then Michael Douglas's character finished it. And he had to move in with his mother and had a miserable life. And what you realize is 30 years ago, a generation and a half ago, we'll say, if a generation is 20 years, which generally is what we believe is a generation. But a generation and a half ago, we were provided, as a nation, with a perfect portrait of what I call the Trump voter. Lost his job, put upon, made fun of, lost his wife, lost his child, nothing to live for. Immigrants, people of color, picking on him, bigots, making fun of his sexuality. They all get shot. They all get taken care of. And in the end, so I'm the bad guy. And you realize how this movie tracks over time exactly what became to be known generically as a Trump voter, a MAGA supporter. People with a gun, people who prefer violence over peace, people who do not like people of color, people who are aggrieved and who believe the only way out of their grievance is to fire a gun and to kill people who oppose them. So in many ways, Michael Douglas, Joel Schlesinger, Robert Duvall, they all reminded us 30 years ago of what was to come. And I'm sure Donald Trump knows that as well. He loves the uneducated. He loves violence. We've seen it all in his behavior and in his presidency. This is what he believes. This is how he behaves. This is what he wants out of his life. And he knows how to capture the anger and the fury that in America has been building for 30 years. And it took a Donald Trump to come along and say, well, hey, this is not a movie. This could be real life. And maybe we'll just take all of these various misfortunes and grievances and put them into play. And 30 years ago, if you were 20 years old, 30 years old, you're now 50, you're now 60, and you have all these years, a generation and a half of grievances that have built up inside of you and that come out in fury and rage and shooting innocent people, tracking them down, hunting them, causing insurrection on January 6th, being charged with sedition, believing that the solution comes in the firing of a gun against all enemies. America has become falling down.